the new God of perfection, the new gods of perfection, the new God of perfection, the new goddess of perfection, the new goddesses of perfection, the new goddess of perfection, the old God of perfection, the old gods of perfection, the old God of perfection, the old goddess of perfection, the old goddesses of perfection, the old goddess of perfection, the greater God of perfection, the greater gods of perfection, the greater God of perfection, the greater goddess of perfection, the greater goddesses of perfection, the greater goddess of perfection, the lesser God of perfection, the lesser gods of perfection, the lesser God of perfection, the lesser goddess of perfection, the lesser goddesses of perfection, the lesser goddess of perfection, the higher God of perfection, the higher gods of perfection, the higher God of perfection, the higher goddess of perfection, the higher goddesses of perfection, the higher goddess of perfection, the lower God of perfection, the lower gods of perfection, the lower God of perfection, the lower goddess of perfection, the lower goddesses of perfection, the lower goddess of perfection, the greater spirit of perfection, the greater spirits of perfection, the greater spirit of perfection, the lesser spirit of perfection, the lesser spirits of perfection, the lesser spirit of perfection, the higher spirit of perfection, the higher spirits of perfection, the higher spirit of perfection, the lower spirit of perfection, the lower spirits of perfection, the lower spirit of perfection, the major God of perfection, the major gods of perfection, the major God of perfection, the major goddess of perfection, the major goddesses of perfection, the major goddess of perfection, the minor God of perfection, the minor gods of perfection, the minor God of perfection, the minor goddess of perfection, the minor goddesses of perfection, the minor goddess of perfection, the superior God of perfection, the superior gods of perfection, the superior God of perfection, the superior goddess of perfection, the superior goddesses of perfection, the superior goddess of perfection, the inferior God of perfection, the inferior gods of perfection, the inferior God of perfection, the inferior goddess of perfection, the inferior goddesses of perfection, the inferior goddess of perfection, the ancestor God of perfection, the ancestor gods of perfection, the ancestor God of perfection, the ancestor goddess of perfection, the ancestor goddesses of perfection, the ancestor goddess of perfection, the ascendant God of perfection, the ascendant gods of perfection, the ascendant God of perfection, the ascendant goddess of perfection, the ascendant goddesses of perfection, the ascendant goddess of perfection, the descendant God of perfection, the descendant gods of perfection, the descendant God of perfection, the descendant goddess of perfection, the descendant goddesses of perfection, the descendant goddess of perfection, the transcendent God of perfection, the transcendent gods of perfection, the transcendent God of perfection, the transcendent goddess of perfection, the transcendent goddesses of perfection, the transcendent goddess of perfection, the past God of perfection, the past gods of perfection, the past God of perfection, the past goddess of perfection, the past goddesses of perfection, the past goddess of perfection, the present God of perfection, the present gods of perfection, the present God of perfection, the present goddess of perfection, the present goddesses of perfection, the present goddess of perfection, the future God of perfection, the future gods of perfection, the future God of perfection, the future goddess of perfection, the future goddesses of perfection, the future goddess of perfection, the authentic God of perfection, the authentic gods of perfection, the authentic God of perfection, the authentic goddess of perfection, the authentic goddesses of perfection, the authentic goddess of perfection, the synthetic God of perfection, the synthetic gods of perfection, the synthetic God of perfection, the synthetic goddess of perfection, The synthetic goddesses of perfection. The synthetic goddess of perfection. The progressive god of perfection. The progressive gods of perfection. The progressive god of perfection. The progressive goddess of perfection. The progressive goddesses of perfection. The progressive goddess of perfection. The regressive god of perfection. The regressive gods of perfection. The regressive god of perfection. The regressive goddess of perfection. The regressive goddesses of perfection. The regressive goddess of perfection. The ordinary god of perfection. The ordinary gods of perfection. The ordinary god of perfection. The ordinary goddess of perfection. The ordinary goddesses of perfection. The ordinary goddess of perfection. The extraordinary god of perfection. The extraordinary gods of perfection. The extraordinary god of perfection. The extraordinary goddess of perfection. The extraordinary goddesses of perfection. The extraordinary goddess of perfection. The static god of perfection. The static gods of perfection. The static god of perfection. The static goddess of perfection. The static goddesses of perfection. The static goddess of perfection. The dynamic god of perfection. The dynamic gods of perfection. The dynamic god of perfection. The dynamic goddess of perfection. The dynamic goddesses of perfection. The dynamic goddess of perfection. The land god of perfection. The land gods of perfection. The land god of perfection. The land goddess of perfection. The land goddesses of perfection. The land goddess of perfection. The sea god of perfection. The sea gods of perfection. The sea god of perfection. The sea goddess of perfection. The sea goddesses of perfection. The sea goddess of perfection. The sky god of perfection. The sky gods of perfection. The sky god of perfection. The sky goddess of perfection. The sky goddesses of perfection. The sky goddess of perfection. The god of perfection. The gods of perfection. The god of perfection. The goddess of perfection. The goddesses of perfection. The goddess of perfection. The half god of perfection. The half gods of perfection. The half god of perfection. The half goddess of perfection. The half goddesses of perfection. The half goddess of perfection. The vessel of perfection. The vessels of perfection. The vessel of perfection. The name of perfection. The names of perfection. The name of perfection. The person of perfection. The persons of perfection. The person of perfection. The persona of perfection. The personas of perfection. The persona of perfection. The personage of perfection. The personages of perfection. The personage of perfection. The personality of perfection. The personalities of perfection. The personality of perfection. The personification of perfection. The personifications of perfection. The personification of perfection. The image of perfection. The images of perfection. The image of perfection. The imagination of perfection. The imaginations of perfection. The imagination of perfection. The belief of perfection. The beliefs of perfection. The belief of perfection. The thought of perfection. The thoughts of perfection. The thought of perfection. The word of perfection. The words of perfection. The word of perfection. The action of perfection. The actions of perfection. The action of perfection. The reaction of perfection. The reactions of perfection. The reaction of perfection. The feeling of perfection. The feelings of perfection. The feeling of perfection. The situation of perfection. The situations of perfection. The situation of perfection. The circumstance of perfection. The circumstances of perfection. The circumstance of perfection. The environment of perfection. The environments of perfection. The environment of perfection. The relationship of perfection. The relationships of perfection. The relationship of perfection. The number of perfection. The numbers of perfection. The number of perfection. The formula of perfection. The formulas of perfection. The formula of perfection. The equation of perfection. The equations of perfection. The equation of perfection. The theory of perfection. The theories of perfection. The theory of perfection. The symbol of perfection. The symbols of perfection. The symbol of perfection. The color of perfection. The colors of perfection. The color of perfection. The thing of perfection. The things of perfection. The thing of perfection. The way of perfection. The ways of perfection. The way of perfection. The place of perfection. The places of perfection. The place of perfection. The time of perfection. The times of perfection. The time of perfection. The event of perfection. The events of perfection. The event of perfection. The result of perfection. The results of perfection. The result of perfection. The crown of perfection. The crowns of perfection. The crown of perfection. The throne of perfection. The thrones of perfection. The throne of perfection. The perfection king. The perfection kings. The perfection kingdom. The perfection kingdoms. The perfection king subject. The perfection king subjects. The perfection king's dominion. The perfection king's dominions. The kingdom of perfection. The kingdoms of perfection. The kingdom of perfection. The perfection queen. The perfection queens. The perfection queendom. The perfection queendoms. The perfection queen subject. The perfection queen subjects. The perfection queen's dominion. The perfection queen's dominions. The queendom of perfection. The queendoms of perfection. The queendom of perfection. The perfection prince. The perfection princes. The perfection princedom. The perfection princedoms. The perfection prince's subject. The perfection prince's subjects. The perfection prince's dominion. The perfection prince's dominions. The princedom of perfection. The princedoms of perfection. The princedom of perfection. The perfection princess. The perfection princesses. The perfection princessdom. The perfection princessdoms. The perfection princess's subject. The perfection princess's subjects. The perfection princess's dominion. The perfection princess's dominions. The princessdom of perfection. The princessdoms of perfection. The princessdom of perfection. The Lord of perfection. The lords of perfection. The Lord of perfection. The Lordess of perfection. The Lordesses of perfection. The Lordess of perfection. The priest of perfection. The priests of perfection. The priest of perfection. The priestess of perfection. The priestesses of perfection. The priestess of perfection. The ritual of perfection. The rituals of perfection. The ritual of perfection. The shrine of perfection. The shrines of perfection. The shrine of perfection. The temple of perfection. The temples of perfection. The temple of perfection. The leader of perfection. The leaders of perfection. The leader of perfection. The follower of perfection. The followers of perfection. The follower of perfection. The natural substance of perfection. The natural substances of perfection. The natural substance of perfection. The supernatural substance of perfection. The supernatural substances of perfection. The supernatural substance of perfection. The temporal substance of perfection. The temporal substances of perfection. The temporal substance of perfection. The spiritual substance of perfection. The spiritual substances of perfection. The spiritual substance of perfection. The natural form of perfection. The natural forms of perfection. The natural form of perfection. The supernatural form of perfection. The supernatural forms of perfection. The supernatural form of perfection. The temporal form of perfection. The temporal forms of perfection. The temporal form of perfection. The spiritual form of perfection. The spiritual forms of perfection. The spiritual form of perfection. The age of perfection. The ages of perfection. The age of perfection. The era of perfection. The eras of perfection. The era of perfection. The awakener of perfection. The awakeners of perfection. The awakener of perfection. The awakening of perfection. The awakenings of perfection. The awakening of perfection. The realm of perfection. The realms of perfection. The realm of perfection. The dimension of perfection. The dimensions of perfection. The dimension of perfection. The zone of perfection. The zones of perfection. The zone of perfection. The frequency of perfection. The frequencies of perfection. The frequency of perfection. The century of perfection. The centuries of perfection. The century of perfection. The millennium of perfection. The millenniums of perfection. The millennium of perfection. The purpose of perfection. The purposes of perfection. The purpose of perfection. The meaning of perfection. The meanings of perfection. The meaning of perfection. The culture of perfection. The cultures of perfection. The culture of perfection. The demonstrator of perfection. The demonstrators of perfection. The demonstrator of perfection. The demonstration of perfection. The demonstrations of perfection. The demonstration of perfection. The manifester of perfection. The manifestors of perfection. The manifester of perfection. The manifestation of perfection. The manifestations of perfection. The manifestation of perfection. The presence of perfection. The presences of perfection. The presence of perfection. The glow of perfection. The glows of perfection. The glow of perfection. The goal of perfection. The goals of perfection. The goal of perfection. The plan of perfection. The plans of perfection. The plan of perfection. The book of perfection. The books of perfection. The book of perfection. The philosopher of perfection. The philosophers of perfection. The philosopher of perfection. The philosophy of perfection. The philosophies of perfection. The philosophy of perfection. The releaser of perfection. The releasers of perfection. The releaser of perfection. The release of perfection. The releases of perfection. The release of perfection. The variable of perfection. The variables of perfection. The variable of perfection. The cause of perfection. The causes of perfection. The cause of perfection. The effect of perfection. The effects of perfection. The effect of perfection. The journey of perfection. The journeys of perfection. The journey of perfection. The emergence of perfection. The emergences of perfection. The emergence of perfection. The source of perfection. The sources of perfection. The source of perfection. The originator of perfection. The originators of perfection. The originator of perfection. The origin of perfection. The origins of perfection. The origin of perfection. The forefather of perfection. The forefathers of perfection. The forefather of perfection. The foremother of perfection. The foremothers of perfection. The foremother of perfection. The ancestor of perfection. The ancestors of perfection. The ancestor of perfection. The descendant of perfection. The descendants of perfection. The descendant of perfection. The lineage of perfection. The lineages of perfection. The lineage of perfection. The heritage of perfection. The heritages of perfection. The heritage of perfection. The heir of perfection. The heirs of perfection. The heir of perfection. The co-heir of perfection. The co-heirs of perfection. The co-heir of perfection. The joint heir of perfection. The joint heirs of perfection. The joint heir of perfection. The dynasty of perfection. The dynasties of perfection. The dynasty of perfection. The force of perfection. The forces of perfection. The force of perfection. The law of perfection. The laws of perfection. The law of perfection. The pact of perfection. The pacts of perfection. The pact of perfection. The game of perfection. The games of perfection. The game of perfection. The mask of perfection. The masks of perfection. The mask of perfection. The armor of perfection. The armors of perfection. The armor of perfection. The sword of perfection. The swords of perfection. The sword of perfection. the shield of perfection, the shields of perfection, the shield of perfection, the force shield of perfection, the force shields of perfection, the force shield of perfection, the armored force shield of perfection, the armored force shields of perfection, the armored force shield of perfection, the champion of perfection, the champions of perfection, the champion of perfection, the guardian of perfection, the guardians of perfection, the guardian of perfection, the defender of perfection, the defenders of perfection, the defender of perfection, the protector of perfection, the protectors of perfection, the protector of perfection, the chant of perfection, the chants of perfection, the chant of perfection, the shape of perfection, the shapes of perfection, the shape of perfection, the cube of perfection, the cubes of perfection, the cube of perfection, the cuboid of perfection, the cuboids of perfection, the cuboid of perfection, the sphere of perfection, the spheres of perfection, the sphere of perfection, the spheroid of perfection, the spheroids of perfection, the spheroid of perfection, the prism of perfection, the prisms of perfection, the prism of perfection, the pyramid of perfection, the pyramids of perfection, the pyramid of perfection, the cylinder of perfection, the cylinders of perfection, the cylinder of perfection, the cone of perfection, the cones of perfection, the cone of perfection, the triangle of perfection, the triangles of perfection, the triangle of perfection, the circle of perfection, the circles of perfection, the circle of perfection, the semicircle of perfection, the semicircles of perfection, the semicircle of perfection, the square of perfection, the squares of perfection, the square of perfection, the rectangle of perfection, the rectangles of perfection, the rectangle of perfection, the parallelogram of perfection, the parallelograms of perfection, the parallelogram of perfection, the rhombus of perfection, the rhombuses of perfection, the rhombus of perfection, the trapezoid of perfection, the trapezoids of perfection, the trapezoid of perfection, the polygon of perfection, the polygons of perfection, the polygon of perfection, the pentagon of perfection, the pentagons of perfection, the pentagon of perfection, the hexagon of perfection, the hexagons of perfection, the hexagon of perfection, the septagon of perfection, the septagons of perfection, the septagon of perfection, the octagon of perfection, the octagons of perfection, the octagon of perfection, the nonagon of perfection, the nonagons of perfection, the nonagon of perfection, the decagon of perfection, the decagons of perfection, the decagon of perfection, the evolution of perfection, the evolutions of perfection, the evolution of perfection, the revolution of perfection, the revolutions of perfection, the revolution of perfection, the elemental art of perfection, the elemental arts of perfection, the elemental art of perfection, the elemental science of perfection, the elemental sciences of perfection, the elemental science of perfection, the elemental principle of perfection, the elemental principles of perfection, the elemental principle of perfection, the elemental technology of perfection, the elemental technologies of perfection, the elemental technology of perfection, the low elemental art of perfection, the low elemental arts of perfection, the low elemental art of perfection, the low elemental science of perfection, the low elemental sciences of perfection, the low elemental science of perfection, the low elemental principle of perfection, the low elemental principles of perfection, the low elemental principle of perfection, the low elemental technology of perfection, the low elemental technologies of perfection, the low elemental technology of perfection, the high elemental art of perfection, the high elemental arts of perfection, the high elemental art of perfection, the high elemental science of perfection, The high elemental sciences of perfection. The high elemental science of perfection. The high elemental principle of perfection. The high elemental principles of perfection. The high elemental principle of perfection. The high elemental technology of perfection. The high elemental technologies of perfection. The high elemental technology of perfection. The agent of perfection. The agents of perfection. The agent of perfection. The agency of perfection. The agencies of perfection. The agency of perfection. The amplifier of perfection. The amplifiers of perfection. The amplifier of perfection. The amplification of perfection. The amplifications of perfection. The amplification of perfection. The enhancer of perfection. The enhancers of perfection. The enhancer of perfection. The enhancement of perfection. The enhancements of perfection. The enhancement of perfection. The magnifier of perfection. The magnifiers of perfection. The magnifier of perfection. The magnification of perfection. The magnifications of perfection. The magnification of perfection. The influencer of perfection. The influencers of perfection. The influencer of perfection. The influence of perfection. The influences of perfection. The influence of perfection. The emanator of perfection. The emanators of perfection. The emanator of perfection. The emanation of perfection. The emanations of perfection. The emanation of perfection. The converger of perfection. The convergers of perfection. The converger of perfection. The convergence of perfection. The convergences of perfection. The convergence of perfection. The aura of perfection. The auras of perfection. The aura of perfection. The impression of perfection. The impressions of perfection. The impression of perfection. The intelligence of perfection. The intelligences of perfection. The intelligence of perfection. The sophistication of perfection. The sophistications of perfection. The sophistication of perfection. The genius of perfection. The geniuses of perfection. The genius of perfection. The polymath of perfection. The polymaths of perfection. The polymath of perfection. The psychic of perfection. The psychics of perfection. The psychic of perfection. The knowledge of perfection. The knowledges of perfection. The knowledge of perfection. The understanding of perfection. The understandings of perfection. The understanding of perfection. The wisdom of perfection. The wisdoms of perfection. The wisdom of perfection. The secret of perfection. The secrets of perfection. The secret of perfection. The mystery of perfection. The mysteries of perfection. The mystery of perfection. The revelation of perfection. The revelations of perfection. The revelation of perfection. The tactic of perfection. The tactics of perfection. The tactic of perfection. The strategy of perfection. The strategies of perfection. The strategy of perfection. The strength of perfection. The strengths of perfection. The strength of perfection. The might of perfection. The might of perfection. The might of perfection. The power of perfection. The powers of perfection. The power of perfection. The authority of perfection. The authorities of perfection. The authority of perfection. The dominion of perfection. The dominions of perfection. The dominion of perfection. The rhythm of perfection. The rhythms of perfection. The rhythm of perfection. The melody of perfection. The melodies of perfection. The melody of perfection. The music of perfection. The musics of perfection. The music of perfection. The lyric of perfection. The lyrics of perfection. The lyric of perfection. The song of perfection. The songs of perfection. The song of perfection. The dance of perfection. The dances of perfection. The dance of perfection. The spirit of perfection. The spirits of perfection. The spirit of perfection. The soul of perfection. The souls of perfection. The soul of perfection. The body of perfection. The bodies of perfection. The body of perfection. The mark of perfection. the marks of perfection, the mark of perfection, the promise of perfection, the promises of perfection, the promise of perfection, the visionary of perfection, the visionaries of perfection, the visionary of perfection, the vision of perfection, the visions of perfection, the vision of perfection, the picture of perfection, the pictures of perfection, the picture of perfection, the sound of perfection, the sounds of perfection, the sound of perfection, the tongue of perfection, the tongues of perfection, the tongue of perfection, the language of perfection, the languages of perfection, the language of perfection, the communication of perfection, the communications of perfection, the communication of perfection, the people of perfection, the peoples of perfection, the people of perfection, the society of perfection, the societies of perfection, the society of perfection, the fortress of perfection, the fortresses of perfection, the fortress of perfection, the government of perfection, the governments of perfection, the government of perfection, the city of perfection, the cities of perfection, the city of perfection, the nation of perfection, the nations of perfection, the nation of perfection, the civilization of perfection, the civilizations of perfection, the civilization of perfection, the world of perfection, the worlds of perfection, the world of perfection,